Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you to the organizers and to Craig for inviting me onto this panel. When this conference was beginning to be organized, several people encouraged me to submit an abstract. I spent some time thinking about what I could say that would be relevant to me and that would resonate with you, the audience. I came to the conclusion that I should talk about the impact of my socioeconomic class on my personal life, my professional life, and my current academic life. My working class background, it will be different to the backgrounds that have been previously shared by Craig, Lou, and Robert, in the sense that I was born in Singapore. The history of my family is one of displacement through colonialism and through the Second World War. My parents came to Singapore to start anew, but without any resources. They belonged to the laboring class, that laboring class generation in Asia, who had no education capital. But crucially, they were not given opportunities to acquire education. But my parents, like many in their generation in Singapore, were determined that their children should get education, but at all costs. Now, education in Singapore is not free. Public education is subsidized, but it has to be paid for. And I came through the public education route. My father worked in a factory, but was also involved in a number of precarious manual jobs. Essentially, my family had to sacrifice a great deal to put 4 children through school. The emphasis on education in Singapore came from 3 key constituencies: parents, schools, and politicians. Now, when I look back at my own life, I know that without these 3 key drivers, I wouldn't be here now. But I will also accept that there was a price paid for all of these. Now, I came to the UK through a bursary to do an undergraduate degree, but I had to do paid work throughout my undergraduate time to supplement and to be able to survive. Now, in my 3rd year in the UK, I applied for some 300 jobs in both public and private sectors and got an interview from only one, which was at that time the National Housing Federation. Now, at this time, I was completely unaware of the labour market penalties that people such as myself faced at that time. But I look back and I think it took a huge amount of resilience to keep going to get a job. And I did end up with the National Housing Federation as my first job, right after my undergraduate degree. Now, after a few years in the quasi sort of public sector, I decided that I wanted to move to financial services sector. But again, it wasn't easy. But it wasn't easy because at that time, financial services was probably the most competitive market for new entrants. It was the first choice, I think, for many people in my position. And this was also compounded by the fact that I had no connections, no networks to the sector. But despite this, I did enter the sector and I managed to build a career in financial services. But in 2015, I knew that I had hit a glass ceiling. And this glass ceiling was predominantly because of my gender and class, and to some extent, ethnicity. After I had reached a certain level of technical competence within financial services, I felt that I was being offered roles where I was given no authority and no status. So it was quite clear where they felt that I belonged. What I think is key in every industry is which class runs any one industry. So the previous three speakers talked about the dominance of the middle class in the academic sector. In financial services, classes rarely discussed, but we are very quick to pick up cues and signals. So I was quick to learn that if I were to survive or succeed in financial services, I had to suppress my class background, as did other people. And the more senior I got, the more apparent it became that I was an outsider, largely through my class. Executive management teams and corporate boards in financial services are typically made up of people who come from privileged backgrounds. Now, and these people talk about the importance for staff to be resilient despite setbacks. But to me, their understanding of resilience doesn't go beyond their own boundaries. Now, Lou, I think, said that she was pushed from higher education. In a way, I feel that I was also pushed from financial services because I was good enough to be up to a certain level. I just wasn't going to be good enough in their eyes to go beyond that. So this was also a time that I decided to switch to academia. I'd always wanted to go back to school, and my interest for pursuing a doctoral research was very much driven by my interest in class issues in financial services. And this opened up a new sort of understanding of academia. So I explored my research interest with some early conversations with professors from a small number of universities, and quickly realized that there was little appetite for class as a category in white-collar occupation research. Instead, all of these professors steered me towards focusing on ethnicity and gender. I think to me, this was a critical point which is when I began to realize that business schools are very much run by middle-class academics who are not interested in class issues. So the system, as Craig and Robert said just now, is made up of academics from privileged background, but in my own field, these are the same academics who are shaping the direction of research. Or they could be run by working class academics who take on middle class behaviors. Now, one professor who has a fairly high profile in the media was recently on a Radio 4 program. I say recently, it was last year actually, on a Radio 4 program, repeatedly telling the presenter that race issues trump class issues. And this made me quite sad. This sort of ignorance is also perpetuated, I think, by the literature review I have just completed. In a review of some 106 papers from the business and organization field, only 3 mentioned class. And in 2 of them, class was added as a postscript. Much of the intersectional scholarship in the review I had looked at focused very much on the intersection of class and ethnicity. So with my own background, I felt that the omission of class was noticeable. Now, I started my PhD last year, and my supervisors discussed sort of different theoretical frameworks that I could consider adopting for my research. One of these was post-colonialism. As someone whose family history is intertwined with colonial history, I was interested in this, and I explored this avenue further by reading, researching, and talking to other academics, including PhD students. But then soon it became clear to me that some of the key voices in the post-colonialism field are upper-caste Indians from India, but who are now living in the West. I felt that their works were being accepted uncritically without challenge in academia. A class system from a country that I have never lived in has now emerged to impact me in my new academic life. Out of my own values and principles, I have decided to find alternative theoretical frameworks for my research, which brings me to my final point. The point about decolonizing curriculum. There are different definitions, I believe, for the decolonization of curriculum, but they more or less are ethnicity-based interpretations, not class-based interpretations. Class was at the bottom of the old hierarchy, but class is still at the bottom of the new hierarchy. All the voices involved in wanting to dismantle the old hierarchical system seem to be in agreement that the working class should still remain at the bottom. I mean, personally, I would like to see more academics working in the field that I am, probe into class issues to predict career experiences in white-collar professions, and not simply accept that gender and ethnicity trump class all of the times. A lot of Indians in academia tend to be upper-caste Indians, and they often make the error of assuming that I am also one of them. Now, in the past, I would have neither confirmed nor challenged these assumptions. But now I think I have found my voice at age 53 when when I decided to pursue a doctoral research. And as Craig said earlier, we have to be brave ourselves. And I think I have now found the courage to speak about my background to people in academia. And that is my sort of personal story. And I'm happy to take questions.
Excellent. That was great, Marnie. So as with the other speakers, again, there's been quite a number of comments and questions and the highlighting of certain points that you've spoken about as well. I think one of the main points of constructive intrigue, if I can use such a term, is the way that your presentation has focused on the invisibility of class in relation to your experience, both in the professional and academic context as well. Because you mentioned that the suppression of class, the
Yes.
feel that you need to suppress your kind of class background.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm being too controversial. Maybe I am, if I suggest that it's unfashionable to sort of refer to the idea of class. And I think Kit, in her keynote, referred to this as well. But have you any ideas, any thoughts as to how we could possibly move towards uniting people of different kind of characteristics under a kind of refreshed or renewed banner of class? How might we move forward with that?
I think it is right that class doesn't come up in conversation. Certainly in the private sector, class is not an issue that is discussed. It is omitted, it is disregarded and neglected, whereas gender, ethnicity, and other issues have come to the forefront. My own personal view is that I think if you look at ONS statistics, you can more or less understand the different groups that fall under working class backgrounds, and that they are not just white working class backgrounds. There are people from ethnic minorities who also fall under a working class background. I almost feel what is really lacking is that bridge between the white working class population and the white ethnic minority groups. It's almost as if the narrative that is being shaped by the more privileged people, by the middle class people, is sort of seeking to divide us to some extent. It is it is So I think people from ethnic minority backgrounds see ourselves very much on ethnicity identities, which are of course important. It's important to me, but equally important to me is my class background and how my class background has shaped me, and therefore what commonalities I have with other people from other ethnic minority groups based on our class experiences. Yeah. And I just feel that somehow, I don't know how we do this. I have no answers to this, except that I do think, and I think several speakers have already made the point that, you know, we need to sort of understand the solidarity between all of us based on our class, and not let those people who are governing us in the different spheres divide us by our ethnicity. So there's, you know, people make some derisive comments about white working class people. Now, I find that derisive because I think I have the same classes, and I think that's wrong. And people like me should also stand up and say that's wrong. And, you know, we need to build a bridge, but we need to do it collectively. And there needs to be awareness, and that's what's really lacking, I think, that awareness.
Yeah, that's a really good response, because I was really quite taken in a good way in your talk when you kind of identified yourself in relation to gender, class, and then following on from that, ethnicity. Because I agree with you, listening to your biography and your kind of early life context in a different country, that couldn't be more far removed from my kind of cultural experience. But the kind of patterns and influences that you mentioned resonate with me. There is much that we can actually unite behind.
Yes.
So another question, let me just check the time. Oh, we're okay, we've got 3 minutes. An interesting term that crops up on the question facility, currently quite popular, it's being spoken about in universities, including my own, is the notion of decolonizing the curriculum. And somebody used the term declassing the curriculum, which I think is an interesting term. I just wonder what your thoughts on that, and in relation to your research so far, how could that be done in relation to your own subject in order to declass the curriculum?
So, for instance, I have refused to use post-colonial theories written by people from privileged class. That's a personal decision, and it is a decision based on my values. I just don't think, and there are an awful lot of Indian academics from India, both in the UK and in the US, who come from very privileged class, who are doing very well in academia, but their works, unless you are Indian who understand how to look for somebody's background, they can sort of flit between the two without being criticized by either party, if that makes sense. But they come from privileged backgrounds. And so in my own research, I have made a point of, you know, looking and understanding of disregarding works. I'm not completely disregarding, but not giving them a prominence. Because I think unless you are a working class person, I'm not sure you have the right, or unless you come through the system, I'm not sure you can then pontificate to other people what little agency they have in any structure, for instance.
Absolutely.
And in my own research, despite being steered towards looking at ethnicity or gender, or ethnicity and gender, I am including a class element to my research, because it's important. And it's an understudied dimension in the world of business and organization studies.
Excellent. Yeah, that's prompted a number of kind of further comments about there's quite a level of interest in this idea of declassing the curriculum. Anyway, that brings us. We've used our time. That's our panel that's come to a close. So I just want to thank all the panelists. They were amazing presentations, and I can see from the comments and the questions that it's been really well received by people.